Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Some of you might know who I am. My name is May. I think I can speak for both the W.O.W Project and the Chinatown Art Brigade and say that we're very, very excited to have you all here to partake in this open conversation about the wave of galleries that have opened here in Chinatown, and relevant to that, the changes and the transformations that have happened within the neighborhood. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the W.O.W Project, its mission, and as well as this idea of melding art, innovation, design, and community engagement together. So yes, I'm kind of nervous. A question that I left Southeast Asia and China after working in the NGO and nonprofit sector with was, what is the role of an individual, community members in a community's development? And this question quickly became quite personal when I landed here when I landed back in Chinatown about 7 months ago, and was overwhelmed by these changes in the neighborhood that I grew up. About 2 months ago, I had the opportunity to pick this question apart through establishing the W.O.W Project, actually, and its vision and mission. So the W.O.W Project strives to raise cultural and historical awareness of the Chinatown community in order for residents and community members to look forward and be a part of shaping the future of the neighborhood and what it looks like. So going back to what I mentioned before about art, design, innovation, and community engagement, all of those things are at the heart of what the W.O.W Project is looking to do. And we're really trying to meld the two and create a space that facilitates the growth of these innovative community engagement ideas through dialogues like these, workshops, design challenges, and hopefully in the near future, local artist residencies. So I do think that it is possible for the Chinatown community to grow alongside these spaces like Chinatown Soup, Mocha, and I'm excited to have you all a part of this conversation as the first one of many to share thoughts and ideas on how this might look like in our vision for the cultural and economic landscape of this neighborhood. So thank you so much. I'm gonna pass it over to Tomie to moderate the discussion, but thank you again for coming out and being a part of this, and happy to take questions later on. So as you know, we're live streaming the discussion as well. Something to keep in mind, we have a hashtag for the conversation. It's CTown, capital N-O-T, number 4, sale. So Chinatown not for sale, but it's abbreviated for a hashtag.
Is there a mic on that we're using?
So yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, excited for the conversation.
Thank you, May. So just again to repeat that this panel will be filmed, and I'm hoping that this will be okay for everybody in the audience. If not, if you want to be out of range of the camera, that is one way for you to not be included in the documentation. And we are also live streaming, as she said, this conversation, which apparently there are people in California watching at this point. Okay. So my name is Tomie Arai, and I'll be your moderator today. I am actually a founding member of the Chinatown Art Brigade, and we are so excited and honored to be collaborating and co-sponsoring this event this evening with the W.O.W Project. I'd just like to introduce the other 2 members of the brigade, Betty Yu and Mansi Kong, who's doing the filming. We are really excited about doing a public art project in Chinatown this summer, and if any of you are interested, we just constructed a new website. So please go there, and you'll find out all about us and our mission. It's www.ChinatownArtBrigade.com. .org. Oh, .org. Thanks. So before we begin our panel, first of all, I'd like to thank Herb Tam from the Museum of Chinese Americas and Michelle Maria Esteva from the gallery Chinatown Soup for so graciously accepting our invitation to be panelists. I have to say, we did extend the invitation to many galleries, and Chinatown Soup was one of the first to respond, and we thank you for that. We aren't going to name the many galleries that didn't respond, except that I will say that I was quite disappointed that NADA, the New Art Dealers Association on 55 Christie Street, did not. So if there's any opportunity, or if NADA, you're out there and you're watching this, to engage with them, I hope we can do that in the future. I just wanted to go over very quickly the format for this evening. It's going to be a conversation, a lively conversation, I think. And I just wanted to establish a few ground rules as well. The topic of today's panel, Chinatown, New York's latest art scene, question mark, is a conversation that I think could have happened in a gallery or a museum or a cultural institution, but we intentionally wanted this kind of exchange to occur in the Chinatown community. So this is a community-led discussion, and we're just very happy to be able to initiate an exchange of this kind in this setting. So thank you, WOW. So this will be a four-part discussion. I'm sorry it sounds so complicated, but we're trying to figure out how to be as democratic as possible. We're asking the two panelists to introduce themselves through a 5 to 10 minute statement. And then we have asked 2 or 3 members of the audience to respond and give a 5-minute statement. Do you have a person in the audience that you?
Sean.
So we've asked Sean Gilder,
Hi, yes.
Liz Moy, and Ryan Wong to be respondents. And Jenny. I don't know if she knows that she is one, but anyway.
Oh, no.
Okay. We'll give the panelists an opportunity to answer or respond to the statements, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, and Betty Yu will be helping me facilitate that. And then we plan to close a bit early so we can have some closing remarks and talk about the future of discussions like this. So just some ground rules. We just hope that this will be the kind of conversation you feel free and feel that it's a safe enough space to talk. Please be considerate. Let me read this. And try not to dominate the conversation, but keep your remarks brief. We just want to encourage people to respect and value each other's contributions, and most of all, stay productive. So before we, actually, one more thing before we go into the actual panelists' remarks. I think that it might be helpful to establish through a very quick mapping exercise what we mean when we talk about Chinatown. Because I think that historically, when people have referred to Chinatown, it has always been specifically what they call the Chinatown core, or the 5 or 6 blocks around Mott Street. I think that you might, as I guess, a newly settled sort of ethnic enclave in New York, this core was probably bounded by, I would say, Mulberry Street on one side, the Bowery on the other, and Canal to the north, and Worth to the south. So it's a very small area. We can probably all agree that within the last 2 decades, Chinatown has expanded and grown, and its boundaries have shifted considerably. So I just like to get a sense of what people think of, what they visualize when they hear Chinatown, the name of Chinatown. Where would you set the boundaries unofficially for the neighborhood today? So in the north, can I get a sense of what street you think Chinatown extends as far up to? Houston? Houston, all right. I would have said Delancey and Kenmare, but you think it goes up that far?
Well, when I get near Houston Street, I start to kind of see things that, in terms of the urban life, kind of trickles into my notion of Chinatown. The scale of the neighborhoods kind of gets small, and it kind of funnels down into like when you get down around Mott Street and Canal.
Well, I think without the benefit, for example, of a census, when we think of a community, we're probably thinking in terms of the signage, the restaurants, who predominantly uses the public spaces, the parks, the public schools, the hospitals, the social services, and that might not be, for instance, the Lower East Side is an enormously diverse neighborhood historically, a destination for immigrants. But there are certainly areas of what was once the Lower East Side that are now considered Chinatown. So I was wondering do people believe should we compromise somehow? Is Houston too far north for some people, or? All right, so would you say Delancey? Could we say Delancey? Okay. So on the west, how far west do you think Chinatown extends today?
Broadway or Lafayette?
Broadway. Okay. And south? Any ideas?
Chatham Square right here.
Chatham Square.
Well, this is
Okay.
the old traditional boundary. There were only, 5 square blocks over here.
Well,
Which is still probably worth.
where's?
Isn't worth the.
So I might actually go as far as to say the Two Bridges area, which is Cherry Street, almost the waterfront. And how about east? Essex?
That was east. Kind of past Essex, a block or two.
Clinton? Can we say Clinton? Okay. So let's just establish that when we say Chinatown, we mean to the north, Delancey, to the west, Broadway, to the south, the Two Bridges area of Cherry Street, and to the east, Clinton. So given those boundaries, can I have a show of hands of how many people in this room live in Chinatown? Great. Okay, and how many people work in Chinatown? And how many people are artists or work in the arts here? So I see a lot of the same people raise their hands 3 times. So I think this is going to be a great group, and I thank you, for participating in that little mapping exercise. So, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Herb Tam to begin the panel.
Yeah, thanks for having me and the museum be a part of this, and it's great to be in this space, and really appreciate this platform that is being generated here. So, I could have a very gut level response to this subject. Art galleries in this neighborhood. And I'll get into that, but I first wanted to just describe the museum's role in the neighborhood, because it's always been thinking about how Chinatown is changing, and in the beginning, a group of people at Basement Workshop, which was a collective of Asian American cultural producers and historians, they saw how things were changing in the neighborhood, shops like this and other kinds of stores were closing, and things were being left out into the streets, and old folks were dying. Nobody was here to keep the memories of these people and that was all because the neighborhood was changing, because new immigrants were moving in, and other factors. So this group decided, let's collect all this stuff that's being tossed out, and try to capture people's memories, and create like a collection and a documentation project. So over the years, we started to do exhibitions out of the collection, and because of that, just by the very nature of doing exhibitions, you start working with artists, and a lot of people that started Basement Workshop were artists, so there's this natural connection to the arts, but through a historical documentation process. And so therefore, over the years, we have worked with a lot of artists, including Tomie and Ken Chu, and more recently Li Ming Wei. Amy Yao is a young artist that we worked with recently, and we're it's just something that we naturally do, I think. So I feel like we're also as much a place for art and art space as we are a place that describes social history and documents it. Which is a really interesting position for us, and for me too. Like, as somebody who's like moved to New York to be in the art world, and this is where the sort of contradictions occur within me, because I love contemporary art. I love going to galleries. I love galleries that sell art. I love museums that show art. I love alternative spaces that challenge us about what art should do and what exhibitions can do. And I think that it's also important for everybody to have access to challenging contemporary art, because one of the things I think contemporary art does really well is give a way for people to express some kind of difference, and to think about what is at the margins of society, and to challenge what freedom of expression means, And so for communities that are marginalized, I think it's really important to encounter some crazy stuff that people decided to make, and that is art. And art doesn't occur, or those kind of statements don't occur generally outside the realm of contemporary art. So therefore, I think for Chinatown, it'll be really cool to have an engagement with contemporary art, which is what's happening now, which is what we're talking about. But now that I'm at the museum, and kind of have a little bit of a distance from contemporary art as an art worker, now that it's so close, I'm like, hold up. But the way that this is happening, feels like a little bit too much, too soon, too fast, and again, it's a gut level response, and maybe there's there will be a chance to talk about that gut level response, but I definitely feel conflicted about all of these new galleries coming in to the neighborhood, and I think it has to do with a stark contrast between what they're showing, how much it's selling for, and then what else there is around here and what has been around here. And I think, because of what we do at the museum, I'm especially sensitive to changes in the neighborhood, even though we know that neighborhoods change a lot. And those of you that have been here for much longer than I have know that it has changed quite a bit for a long time. Like, I remember I had moved here in '98, and the only spaces for art in Chinatown that I knew of, and these are places that only I knew of, right? Or they're the only ones that I knew were Bob Lee's Asian American Art Center, and then Art in General, who I used to intern for. And then there were, in my radar, there were no other art spaces. And then later on, like in the early 2000s, then there were a few more spaces, like Rena Spalling's, Macaroni, some others. Cucci Fritos in the Lower East Side opened up, I think, I remember, in the early 2000s too. And then, that started, I think, this wave of galleries coming into the neighborhood. And at first it was like, okay, it was like, that's cool. Like, some people joined Bob Lee and Art in General. But I think now it's much different. It's a much different feeling to have so much, happening now. And there's a whole interesting history there that I was just talking to Beatrice, my colleague, and Andrew, my colleague, about, like, when we were at work today, But there's a super interesting history of just the art market, real estate, especially in Chelsea, and why, these galleries are now thinking that Chinatown is like the new frontier, and there's more to say about, like, that there already is culture happening here, in Chinatown. And it's as if these galleries are coming in and, like, sort of enlightening everybody of what culture is. And I think that's the part that's really offensive. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Herb, for that overview. Next is Michelle Marie.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. First, I'd like to thank May, wherever she is, for inviting us all here. There you are. And it's really courageous, the choice that you made to take over the family business versus going to grad school. And I've had to deal with going to grad school and starting my own business, and I'm still not done with grad school yet. So it's that's really remarkable on your part, especially since this is a piece of living history. Also, thank you, Chinatown Arts Brigade. It's really nice to finally meet you, and it's super rad to finally be on a panel with Herb, whom I've seen speak for a little over a year now. So that's cool for me. Anyway, again, I'm Michelle. I'm here to talk about Chinatown Soup. And we're an 18-month-old nonprofit space on Orchard at the corner of Canal. If you want, we can go to slide 2. So here's a brief background, the origins of Soup. The idea originated from an interview assignment I completed for my first semester grad school elective about a new approach to urban planning that we called creative placemaking, at least at NYU. And that's based on the idea that arts can introduce cooperative logic to urban communities and enhance conscientious, inclusive development of neighborhoods as an alternative to institutionally driven master planning of the Robert Moses urban renewal variety. So for that project, I interviewed the current president of Detroit Soup, Amy Carl. And Detroit Soup was a monthly microfunding dinner that began in 2010, started by 2 women in their mid-20s. And the idea was to support emerging artistic projects in downtown Detroit, which was revitalizing at the time through public participation. Amy then encouraged me to check out the Start Your Own Soup template on the website, and that turned into a concept presentation for my final submission to the class, and then a business plan submission to New York State to become a legit business. So in turn, that spawned a crazy search for cheap real estate, the emptying of my meager savings account, donations from family and friends, and a Kickstarter. to take down the lease that we now have on Orchard Street. Since the real estate game in New York is quite different than Detroit, and the art scene has its own unique characteristics here, Chinatown Soup drew on other key influences to inform what we do. And mainly, the overarching framework for our approach is the Stone Soup folk parable. That's sort of like a multicultural story, also interpreted as a lesson in teamwork. So briefly, it's about strangers who enter a hungry village and collaborate with locals to make soup for everybody to enjoy. So in addition to that story, I learned about Chinatown's Basement Workshop and one of my favorite artists, Gordon Clark, and his wife Carolyn Gooden's Project Food in Soho. Those are both arts activist organizations back in the 70s that were kind of radical at the time. So drawing on all of that was fun for me to sort of concept Chinatown Soup, but above all, the grounding belief of the project is that an accessible, conscious, and centrally located creative space can and should exist in downtown New York. So we can go to slide 3 now. Thanks. Speaking of downtown New York, I know we already had a mapping lesson, so we're all agreed on the boundaries of Chinatown, but coming from an urban planning background, I'm kind of obsessed with maps. So the red and black map is one I made. It shows core Chinatown in the middle, and then how it's expanded really in full force since the immigration quota was lifted in the 70s to replace Eastern European and Italian-dominated neighborhoods. The other image is a screenshot of the Lower East Side gallery map, which also includes Chinatown, although interestingly it's branded Lower East Side. And that maps pretty much all of the galleries that exist in Chinatown and the Lower East Side. It changes every month. I'm always curious to see who's disappeared and who's entered the neighborhood. I'd love to make a GIF showing that change. That would be pretty radical. And then I just included a screenshot of this New York Magazine expose called Why Chinatown Has Stayed Chinatown, which is a really insightful explanation of how real estate and Chinese ownership of real estate has maintained a strong culture, Chinese culture here, more so than any other immigrant neighborhood in New York. So we can go to slide 4. Thanks. So preservation is a main goal of Chinatown Soup, and our first soup production was a multi-sensory retrospective narrating life in 1970s Chinatown with a focus on youth gangs. And to put this project together, I worked with Yue Ma and Kevin Chu at MoCA's collection team to build an archive about youth gangs that drew on writings from Chinese American authors, journalists, and activists of the time, such as Henry Chang and Betty Lee Sung. That photo's from an interview we conducted at her apartment. She treated us to tea. It was super cool to talk to her. So many stories. She's actually the main reason why I was able to learn about the youth gangs beyond the sort of academic historical overview. So I give her a lot of credit for sharing that information and being a friend to a lot of Chinese kids at the time who were pretty lost coming to this city. In addition to that part of the exhibit, we were also able to outline a timeline of contemporary Chinatown's evolution from the early 70s. And Chinese American artists Boy Kong and Victoria L., who also goes by #AsianGirl, who are the ages of the average youth gang members, use their art to bring more of these historical narratives to life. Our next neighborhood-focused projects are opening in August and September. In August, we're going to resurrect the iconic Troll Museum, I'm not sure if you guys had the pleasure of visiting during its long stay on Orchard Street, but unfortunately it's recently shuttered due to the eviction of longtime resident Reverend Jen Miller. There's an article, I think, on Artsy about that really takes you through the history of the project, and it was one of those cool, quirky neighborhood gems that unfortunately no longer exists. In September, we're putting on a show called Bottle Queens. It's a documentary photography exhibition headlined by artist Katya Reitkamp, honoring the Chinese women who collect bottles and cans around the area and calling into question increasingly oppressive city recycling policies that are interfering with the way these women live and work. Slide 5 would be great, thank you. So here's more flyers and photos from hyper-local exhibitions and events we participated in. New Ink, the New Museum's artist incubators featured there. We have the show that we did with Nick Sawala to participate in the Lower East Side Gallery Drive to support the Bowery Mission. Mavens was our first ever show. That was put on by Tara, whom I TA'd at NYU, and it was about her family's history of the Jewish deli in New York City, and they were featured in that documentary Deli Man. So that was pretty cool. We hosted the opening party for that. And then we had a skate show, which if you click again, you can see the video of the skate ramp we built in the backyard, which was kind of nuts. It's supposed to be a replica of the skate conditions of the Chinatown banks in Chatham Square, which were benched in 2010 by the cops, and that was a major spot for skaters on their way to the Brooklyn banks, which I think were torn down for some development project. Next slide is great, thank you. So this slide is just more of a general overview of other shows that we've done. Above all, we're a multicultural, multidisciplinary, and multi-purpose space that acts as a haven for creatives of all types. So whether that's people putting on fashion shows, hosting Burundian refugees seeking asylum for genocide that's happening over there, and working with the UN to get them artist visas. That was a big accomplishment. Everything from that scale to local after-school programs, performing artist residencies, college classes open to the public. Let's see what else is in there. And solo shows for emerging artists. We'd like to appeal to as many folks as possible. So that's more of an overview of what we do outside of those other educational shows. Slide 7 would be great. Thank you. So our future immediate goals include expanding our residency program, and pictured above is Ashley Yang Thompson. She's our residency director. She's going to help standardize after-school programming to sort of streamline how local kids from the neighborhood who've enjoyed visiting Soup on an ad hoc basis can do so and interact with our artists and residents to have more arts enrichment. I guess their funding's pretty low, so we're hoping we can try and help fill in those gaps. We like to fundraise the rest of the money we need to open an artist-run cafe and get a little extra revenue into the space, so we can offer more micro grants and continue the evolution of our Soup Supper Club micro-funding dinners. And finally, find ways to address some of the anxieties written on those postcards, which were featured at Equity Gallery, which is a long-standing nonprofit gallery a few blocks north of us, that had an open call for artists to come through and talk about how gentrification and being in serious financial debt was impeding their ability to live and work the way that they want in New York. So that's where we're at now. And then if you press it again, you can see that's Boy Kong painting our gate. That was pretty cool. Lower East Side Bid sponsored a 100 Gates project, so now if you walk down Orchard Street, you get mural art, which is pretty rad. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I'm sorry, Michelle.
Okay.
We had invited a few members of the audience to give a quick 5-minute response to what the panelists have shared with us, or anything that they would like to share with. Yes, did you have?
I was going to moderate this panel.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to set the ground rules, maybe. I'm Betty. I'm with Chinatown Art Brigade, and so I know that just for the people who are watching the live stream, in here we're going to get questions. We're going to field questions live. So we're all here. We can see each other face to face. But if you're in the other space or San Francisco, please use the hashtag CTOWN, CTOWN, not NOT 4, the number 4 sale, and then we'll check the feed during Q&A. But for the next 15 minutes, we're going to have 3 respondents. And in this particular section, we're going to have the respondents provide comments and maybe some context for their comments and questions to the panelists. And if May maybe can be a part of that, if there are any questions or responses, comments directed at May. And then we'll give like 3 minutes for the panelists to respond. And then after the respondents, with their prepared remarks have spoken, we're going to open it up for a conversation. Not necessarily Q&A, but there's so much experience in the space, a lot of artists, a lot of folks who have combined probably hundreds of years of experience in art and cultural organizing work. So we want to hear from everyone. So if that makes sense. So we're going to start with Liz, actually, who is a lifelong resident here and an artist. And we're going to start with Liz Moy, and I believe we have a slide of the project she's going to be as well.
Hi, I'm Liz Moy. I'm 4 generations of my family have lived here on Bayard Street since the 40s. I'm also a recent art school graduate with my BFA from NYU. And so what we're looking at on the screen right now is my personal research in mapping galleries of Chinatown. There's currently 80-something galleries within the parameters of what we communally discussed were the boundaries of Chinatown earlier at the beginning of the panel. So I guess I just have a few concerns and questions that I want to address from the panelists. So first, for Michelle, your website states that the community goals of Soup include instilling neighborhood pride, empowering residents, responding to gentrification, and fostering critical dialogue. But I personally went to visit your gallery last year for Lawless, and I found it really offensive. It was poorly researched, and I didn't feel like it told any narrative at all, and your responses to our questions while we were there weren't helpful. So actually, I think in one of the wall texts, it described Chinatown as a shanty, and that was a wall text written by either you or one of your team members. I just want maybe when you respond to these questions to address the type of language you use when you talk about Chinatown. Also, if you could speak later on about your background, how as a non-Chinese or Chinese American person you are authorized or have the credentials to be running a space like this that's claiming to give back to Chinatown specifically, and how your model of Chinatown Soup has deviated from Detroit Soup, which has raised lots of money to give to other organizations to fund their projects. But also, I have a question about your cafe that you said is opening soon. You launched a Giving Tuesday campaign during the holidays, and that specifically said that the cafe would be vegan. If you could speak about how a vegan cafe would cater to the needs of Chinatown and how that would be an open and welcome space for Chinatown residents to eat and commune with artists there. Because I don't think the majority of Chinatown is vegan. Or has the flexibility in their budgets to pay for vegan food in New York City. So other comments I have. If I could just get general thoughts from both of the panelists about how you think galleries increase the rent burden on tenants of Chinatown, because I feel like that's a huge part of the problem, that the presence of galleries and mostly majority white or non-Chinese gallerists and artists, their presence, just the visibility of them, affects the way landlords see their buildings and the profitability that they can gain from pushing out longtime Chinatown residents and instead of replacing them with more galleries, because that obviously diminishes the overall character of Chinatown and its makeup and its cultural history. Then I also would like to ask about just in future programming how you plan to shift your programming to fit these community goals, because outside of Lawless, the shows that you programmed afterwards were about skateboarding, which is very contentious in Chinatown. Not that they understand necessarily about like the artistic aspects of skater culture, but that skating sometimes poses safety issues for a lot of the old people that use these bench spaces and these public parks, and how that was reflective of your community goals in empowering Chinatown residents. So yeah, I would just like some responses to those concerns.
Where would you like me to start? Should we start with Lawless?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the exhibit text for Lawless was cribbed directly from the writings of Chinese American.
No, not those texts. There were wall texts describing.
Right, I'm referring to the wall text. All of that was adapted directly from the authors and journalists who wrote primarily in Bridge magazine and a few others that existed at the time of the 1970s. So we took no creative liberty. We reprinted their words pretty much verbatim.
In the introduction to your show?
Yes.
Okay, not just the interviews or the...
No, all of that was one of the fun parts, actually. Saved us a lot of work. The show essentially wrote itself, and
Is that
was
good cultural programming to let past research done by other people dictate your entire show? That's not really curating, that's just...
It was curating tons of research that we conducted at MoCA over the course of 4 months. And we used the words of Chinese Americans who wrote about their community at the time that all of this change was happening.
Liz, I wonder if we could go to your last question about the how the impact, I think, of these galleries on the landscape of Chinatown, and I wonder if either of you would like to address that.
Well, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier, but when you have all these galleries moving in, commercial galleries that are, have a certain preciousness to their space, in a very kind of like conscious way that they design their spaces in many ways, then you're creating like a luxury neighborhood, and I think that starting with the galleries has allowed other kinds of businesses to move into the neighborhood and start to change what has been like a very working class environment, and to something that is much more about like high rent luxury, and I feel like in New York you're not going to really have those two things coexist. It's going to flip at a certain point where the high rent stuff will drive up the market value of real estate, and then before you know it, the whole thing has changed. And I think that's why there's so much concern about galleries coming here, young gallerists, old gallerists, new gallerists coming in here and not doing one damn thing to engage with Chinese residents, Asian American residents, or others that are, but yeah, so.
If I can, kind of just like link up the question that Liz had and maybe help reframe a little bit, just because I know, Michelle, your organization, Chinatown Soup, is a nonprofit organization, so of course maybe its mission is a little different than a commercial gallery whose pure purpose is
We don't
selling
make money off of selling art.
So I guess to sort of Liz's last question, which was the ideas around shifting the programming to really meet the needs of Chinatown. For instance, this vegan cafe, if you can address that. And then this last question around programming specifically.
Sure. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to raise all the money we need to open a cafe. the vegan menu was a health conscious choice, we would price it with regards to what our rent would require and the kind of money that we would require to support our residency program. I know there's plenty of great places to eat in Chinatown, and other establishments can cater to Chinese cuisine far better than we ever could, not being from here and having any sort of background in that sort of cooking. I know plenty of residents on Orchard Street, especially, who have expressed desire for that sort of cuisine and food. So we're looking to really provide something different that isn't already being served in the neighborhood, in addition to a bunch of other restaurants that are opening right where we are, at the border of Chinatown and the Lower East Side.
Do you want to address the programming question, or?
Could I just add to that? I mean, I think that as an artist, and I hear what your ambivalence, Herb, about how to respond to this. I think just sort of convulsive change in the community, this overnight transformation, with all the development and I would have to say gentrification of residential areas in Chinatown. I think that it is important for people to understand that not all galleries are the same, and that there are differences between artist-led galleries, artist-owned galleries, and commercial galleries. And I think that the remark you made about how people don't understand, or there hasn't been any outreach on the part of the galleries to the neighborhood, is a very valid one. I think that there is a mixture of alarm and intense curiosity about this phenomena, but I do feel like it is the moment at which galleries do have to reach out and begin really a substance-based conversation with the neighborhood in which they're located. So I'm just curious, Michelle, as to how you would position yourself in this sort of larger scope of different types of
Different types of artist spaces. I would say that we're artist run, really. We're not here to make money or participate in the art worlds. We're barely breaking even. It's been a real struggle, and the only reason it's survived is because so many artists have flocked to the space as a haven to show their work and have room to make work and feel like they have a place to go in what's now probably the only accessible arts community in New York. I mean, no one can really be in Chelsea anymore, and Bushwick is its own dimension. So this is really the only neighborhood that artists are coming to now to have a vibrant artistic social life.
Do you feel that you've done enough to respond to some of the concerns of the community?
I'm not sure that that's really my place. I'm here to provide a platform for artists and dialogue. I can't solve the community's problems.
That's what your community goals state.
To solve
Directly on your website.
To solve problems?
Well, none of your programming addresses the actual community goals listed on your website.
I'm not sure what you're basing that claim on.
Sorry, I'm gonna interject for a second, because I know we have two other respondents, and some of this may come up in the questions from the audience. I definitely want to make sure we have time, because there's a lot of rich experience in the room. We're going to actually go to Sean, I think, for responding, and then Ron, where we're going to. So go ahead, Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Gilder. I'm an artist. I lived on Orchard between Canal and Hester in like 2009 to about 2010, and now I'm back. I've moved up north to write about housing, but I skateboard down here all the time, mainly for transport. Try not to be a problem. But I'm an artist, and I just wanted to say that I commend Michelle for coming, because she's probably getting a lot of heat, and she's the only one who opened herself up to open discussion about this. and she's trying to launch a business, and once anybody else tries to launch a business on their own young, that's tough. So obviously fails are going to happen. Oops. But I wanted to speak to you, what you said about the idea of luxury and art galleries. I don't see that connection so much. I mean, I see that business in the art world can reach the billions, which does affect change and does affect your neighborhood, yes. But as far as art galleries being a major disruption versus the skyscrapers that are going up everywhere else around us, like, is this the thing that we need to be addressing more than anything else? I want to address, let's see, I didn't know I was speaking today. There are different types of galleries all over, and it's great that we're having this discussion. That's why I came today. It's because I was incredibly curious about where I was ignorant. I've gone to a lot of her show, the shows they had in Chinatown Soup, and I've seen that she hosts a very varying degree of different types of people coming to discuss, different types of communities that are discussing things, or different types of community awareness that needs to be raised that use her as a hub. And I think that's great. But I mean, I think it's super interesting that to see it from what you're saying is that the art that does exist here is more about what was preserved. And that is definitely obvious. And that's something that is threatened. And that's something that I want to learn more from, or learn about. And because I love the art that cannot be made. Like, I love the art that is genuine. And I love being inspired by genuine art in order to make genuine art. And the Chinese culture is incredibly rich in that. And I don't mean appropriate in any way, but be influenced by color choice, line, things of that nature. And so when it comes to a community that feels kind of, there might be getting shoved out, I hope it's not through art, but I also understand that there are other things that are influencing that we kind of discussed, where you said luxury, where that does need to be discussed. That does need to be spoken about. Because I feel that it's influencing a lot of people's decisions and opinions about new businesses, and about the fact that you guys said that they don't reach out to the community. Because in New York, it's about business. And they don't, and I'm not saying that as like an excuse, no, I'm saying that it should be the case. Because in order for this city to keep surviving, it needs to start kind of folding in on each other in a good way. And so I'm just, I guess that's why I'm here, and that's it.
Thank you.
Do you have anything in particular you want
Um,
us to respond to?
I could address that luxury thing.
Yeah, I would like that.
Yeah.
And the non-Chinese, or just like the non-Chinese run business, like you said, is she doing an effective enough job? And or no, that's what you said. Do you feel like that she's doing an effective enough job? And it's like, I would say no, and I'm sure she would say no. But like I said, she's learning, and that she's the only gallery that kind of reaches a certain youth. And we've seen what can be done with the youth, and she reaches that youth to come and speak. But yeah, she doesn't have the cultural authority, but she is offering the space. So yeah, I guess the non-white.
Thank you.
I was thinking about Chinese takeout restaurants. Some of which, like, you've seen them all over the city, right? And they go in, they'll open up anywhere, right? Any kind of neighborhood, whether it be Upper East Side to deep in Queens to Black communities. And to me, it's interesting that in Black communities, these takeout restaurants will develop new dishes, and they will make it affordable, because you said it's all about business, right?
Oh no, I was saying that the mentality,
Yeah.
and that certain businesses, the way they run, they don't reach out. And I'm saying reach out, it is reaching out. and that's a good practice while it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But I worked as an art director for a real estate company, and I just saw how little they thought about anything other than buying that.
Yeah. And definitely, you know, Chinese takeout places, they get their fair amount of shit from the black community, I'm sure. But the thing is, like, I think there needs to be a sensitivity to the history of Chinese people in America, and it's not it's not a vacuum that this is all existing in, but there's a history of being demeaned in this country, this city, and that's why we're here. That's why Chinatown is here, is because we were our forebears were sort of pushed into these kinds of work. They were pushed into these kinds of neighborhoods. And, you know, when galleries, projects come into the neighborhood and then they position themselves, either they completely are oblivious to that and they just do their thing, right? Like, just plant a white cube into Chinatown and it looks all crazy, or they position themselves, contrast themselves against, and I could quote something here. I can't find it, but you know, they're position themselves against a backdrop that is like of a certain working class, you know, background, or a certain sense of what is falling apart, a certain concept of a dilapidated, rundown area, and that you know, what they're doing is somehow should be seen against that. That, I think, is the part that's the most offensive, is when, because it feels, I'll tell you what it feels like. It feels like they're just stepping on us to get into the sunlight. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's the gut level thing I'm talking about, is that we feel like we're just standing back here while you pose and preen for the camera, and we're basically just some graffiti or some, you know, some old trash that kind of looks interesting, like some old interesting looking trash. That's Chinese culture, that, and but that is something that we, whatever it is that people think that is so like interesting about the neighborhood. That's something that we made. That's something that we did. So therefore, that's our culture. Right. And that is not for it to be sort of, you know, some background for a selfie or something, so or a press photo.
So I think we're going to move on to the last respondent and then open up for discussion and Q&A. I see you. Just give me 1 second, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time too, to actually end our time. So I want to go to Ryan, the respondent, 45 minutes. You can then move from there.
Thank you all so much for being here, for having part of this discussion. I'm a little nervous. I'm usually not that nervous when I talk. Does everyone feel like a little like buzz in the air? Yeah. Like there's some heat going? Okay. Can everyone take a deep breath with me? Right. In. Right. Loosen up. Discomfort's good. I really appreciate everyone's comments and discussion here. So thank you all for being here. I want to pick up on a thread that Herb raised, which was kind of what the stakes are here. Why are we talking about this? And I'm going to take it even further back. Why are we talking about gentrification? And I want to think about displacement. So my family, I'm 6th generation Chinese American. On my dad's side, my family came from right outside Toisan in the 1860s. We're one of the few families to survive the exclusion era. That is displacement. The reason we are here in America is because of the violence of colonialism, of war, of poverty, and that's the whole reason I'm in this campus. So when we're talking about gentrification, we're talking about the exact same forces, except on a micro scale, on a block-to-block, store-to-store, neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis. So I think when we talk about these deep, intense emotions that come up around gentrification, we're talking about this history that stretches back several hundred years. We're talking about what it means to have a home, what it means to be diaspora, how people in the diaspora then are able to form or not form homes somewhere else. So that's, as I see it, the stakes. I want to touch, secondly, I want to acknowledge the elephant that is not in the room, and that is the bigger galleries that are in Chinatown. A lot of the galleries on Orchard Street sell single works of art for $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. And they are right next to wholesale fabric stores. They're right next to bakeries. You have to sell a lot of chassis bao to make $5,000. There's just no way that is a tenable situation where these things can coexist. And the side that's going to last longer if they make the sales, there's no question. So I just want to acknowledge that the actual big forces, the people representing those big forces are actually not in this room, as far as I know. If y'all are, I'd love to hear what you think about this, because I'm really curious. I'm really curious why Chinatown, why you're opening up Chinatown. Number 3, I just want to touch on this question of history and community on one side and arts and the avant-garde on the other side. I think oftentimes we are told that they are separate and mutually exclusive, and I think that's not true. I think that's one of the most insidious myths of art history and kind of the contemporary art world, that one cannot be both creative and artistic and also engage with a community and engage with history. And a couple other folks mentioned this long history of other experiments in Chinatown trying to do that exact same thing. Even before Basement Workshop, there was the Chinatown Hand Laundry Alliance, the Chinese Hand Laundry Alliance, which merged working class organizing with a newspaper. This is a really radical act. Those theories from the 50s that was destroyed by McCarthyism. We have Basement Workshop, of course, the kind of seminal Asian American movement space in New York City. That was an activist space and an art space. They were printing up posters for rallies the next day and also creating music and art. There was Godzilla, there's the Asian American Art Center. All of these spaces, in one way or another, tried to break that boundary, that seeming boundary between organizing and arts production. So I think that is the challenge for anyone coming in that lineage, whether it's Chinatown Soup or Mocha. How does one do that for the contemporary moment? And not to say any of these spaces in the past or the present are perfect. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect art space or perfect project in that sense, but that is kind of the ideal we're holding ourselves to. So on that note, thank you.
So either the panelists want to respond to that? Thank you for that historical context. Yeah, that was like, drop the mic moment. Before, there's a lot of lively tweeting happening of conversations, very, like you said, it's a very emotional for a lot of us conversation that we're in right now. But before we open it for questions, so again, I'm repeating, the people can hear me on the live stream, wherever that is. It's CTOWN not, NOT for sale. That's the hashtag if you wanted to questions. A lot of comments, and I'll be looking at this feed and taking first a question in here and then going into Twitter land. But one thing I just wanted to say really, really quickly is that you named some things, and I think you brought up some really good points, which is that obviously artists and artist projects are often seen, and galleries are seen as the first wave of gentrification. We know that, right? Even placekeeping projects historically. I mean, we're in a moment where you look at what's happening in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. I'm in touch with a lot of community artists in Kansas City, across, in Greensboro, right? Like, artists are often hired by real estate developers, right, for these placekeeping projects. And what happens is they beautify, quote unquote, beautify a neighborhood. Maybe artists can occupy it for a little bit, but then they're going to be displaced. right? You see that historically. These sort of medium-sized commercial galleries are often displaced within 5 years. You look at Soho, you look at Williamsburg, and now there's a lively fight in Bushwick, if you guys have been following. Right? A lot of artists have been organizing to really hold art galleries accountable. So it's this is not like just a conversation in Chinatown, like folks across the country are having these conversations. And so I think with Chinatown Art Brigade and probably what WOW is trying to do is that we are folks from the community. And I was born and raised in Sunset Park. I've been coming to Chinatown doing organizing since I was 16 years old, right, for over 20 years. And many of us, Nancy and Tomie and other folks, Mocha has a legacy, obviously, of the work here. So it's not like there's no arts here. And I think that the spirit of some of the feeds I'm seeing on Twitter is that there is culture here already. There's no culture to bring to us. Our resistance, our resilience of existence, whether it be being displaced from China or Taiwan or Hong Kong or diaspora, coming here, that's displacement. And so our whole lives have been about resistance and resilience, right? And that in itself is culture, right? And so it's not like anyone's bringing this to us. And I think what Chinatown Art Brigade is trying to do, and wow, we are that. Hopefully, we're allying ourselves. We're working with CAV, for instance, CAV Organizing Asian Communities, which some of you probably are familiar with here, because there are folks who are doing this work here already in Chinatown with young people for decades, right? For decades, and so that has to be acknowledged, right? We are doing this work on the backs of many, many folks who've been doing this for many years. My grandfather was a founder of the Chinese Hand Laundry Alliance in 1937. So. Sorry. So I just wanted to say that. Because I do get very emotional when we have these discussions. And I'm someone who is a community member myself, you know. So we're going to open up for questions. So I'm going to read, actually I'll take a question in here and then we'll go to the group.
I got to say something, I'm sorry. It's not a question.
Please, no, comments or questions. This is discussion. Say who you are.
This is the Asian American, I'm Bob Lee. I'm with the Asian American Art Center. We started, me and my wife and a bunch of other people started Basement Workshop. We spun off of Basement in '74. We are brothers of the galleries that are coming. We are arts people. Those galleries are arts people. Most art people are rooted in how they see what the purpose of their life is. They're not all here for commercial reason. I think what WOW wants is to see how to embrace the arts for once after 30, more than, how many years, to see that Chinatown might have an event like this, to consider how the arts are crucial to our community, okay? And to open up to the arts world in New York City, however many flaws they may have in who they are. We need to be smarter, like our grandfathers were, to make this Chinatown attractive to New Yorkers and be able to provide us with a living. We need to see this opportunity that galleries are moving into our community as an opportunity for us to also open to the arts in ways in which we can make our community and our culture an integral part of this community. All the different areas, Tribeca, Little Italy, they all do arts things. They exclude 20, 30 years. They exclude this Chinatown. This is an opportunity for us to break out of the isolation that this community is in and see how we can make friends with some of the galleries here. And so I applaud what you're doing. However naive or however it is what it is. That's what Basement was. It is what it was. And you're doing a similar thing as a nonprofit. In that sense, I'm a nonprofit. We're a little bit different from the commercial places, right? We're trying to relate to our community. You can see what we tried to do. We have a website. We've exhibited thousands of artists. We're really looking at the history of Asian American creative endeavor in the United States from World War II to the present. That's what we're doing. And looking at those artists and seeing how they integrate with this, what all those people are thinking in the galleries. How does that kind of thinking relate to this kind of community? How does that happen? And so we have been involved with, the key issue here is if you want to discuss about gentrification, then come to the Chinatown Working Group. This is not the place to do it. we've been working on for that for 7 years, trying to protect Chinatown from the hotels and the other places that are creeping into. This is a vulnerable community. We can't protect ourselves from these places that are coming in. But don't worry, they're going to move out. They won't stay here long because Chinatown's rent's going to go up. The issue really you're talking about is how are we going to keep our working class people in Chinatown so this remains an authentic community. We don't have to worry about the galleries. They're going to go. The good galleries will stay. The good galleries will stay, right? Those who are really interested in our community, at least in some sense, that would be the case.
So let's. Thank you, Bob.
I just, I think that the key here is the new museum. This didn't happen without the new museum. And we've had relationship with the new museum. We've had breakfast for the community leaders. So many times the community leaders won't go. We did get once. We had the whole Chinatown working group come to the breakfast, and the people of the new museum come in. So I think that if we can break through the barrier that the new museum has in terms of all these intellectuals coming from international places to tell the new museum that they need to relate to the community, and then they just, oh, hello, we need to approach them to really make a long-term kind of relationship in that way.
That's great. Yeah, no, you've raised a lot of very interesting, provocative points, too. I don't know, so let's open it up if anyone wants to respond to that or has a question. This is really kind of more open space. And to be respectful, if you can keep it to 2 to 3 minutes, comments or questions. So why don't we go to the woman in the glasses? I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Well, actually, you had your
No, why don't we'll do you, and then I'm going to do a Twitter question, and then back to you, the woman with the bluish hair. So why don't you go first with the glasses?
My name is Katya, and I am planning on exhibiting my work at Chinatown Soup. I've been working on a documentary photography for the last 2.5 years since the inception, since I moved to the Lower East Side. Chinatown is part of a bigger scope, and I find that the controversy about Michelle is getting old. Like it doesn't need to be addressed. It should be, Chinatown Soup should be able to breathe. I mean, she's only 2 years in business, and the girl, you should have just seen the way that it was. When I first walked in there, I mean, the roof was caved in. I mean, 25 years old and took on a huge responsibility. Does she do it perfectly? No, she doesn't. But does everybody do everything perfectly? That's what the story said. The second thing is, I find it very controversial that the controversy about, I feel like that I'm being discriminated against because I can't come into Chinatown and photograph Chinatown when I've been coming here my entire life. My best memories with my family are in Chinatown. So I stood with CAB against Sammy Mafar in 22 Spring Street. 5 buildings had sued, but I stood with CAB, and so it's not fair. You have a history. Chinatown is historical, and there's so many brilliant things about Chinatown, but it can be carried, and each person should be able to have a perspective to bring it outside of just this spot on the map. And I feel that the controversy is in the controversy of saying that it's controversial, that I wouldn't be able, my work wouldn't be welcome. And I'm not happy about that.
Do folks in the room want to respond to that? That your perception is that folks are saying that you have to, if you're non-Chinese, then you shouldn't be documenting.
Oh, and on the vegan thing, I was not vegan, but my girlfriend, who happens to be Asian, she went total vegan and introduced me to it. And the food is much cleaner, I'm sorry to say, but I get it. But that doesn't, I just had an open mind about it. She was Asian, so I didn't listen.
Gotcha, thanks. Cool. So, do other folks have a response to that? Because I don't think people were necessarily saying that, but right?
Yeah, I would just be curious about your definition of discrimination. Discrimination to me entails a history of racialized violence. I don't know if you had violent interactions in Chinatown, but I don't think that's discrimination. Let me say one more thing that's more of a general comment to all the folks who feel like they're on the defensive in this room. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being open to these discussions. Please watch the defensiveness. We have people who have very high emotions for reasons I just outlined. I respect those high emotions. I respect everyone's right to do the work they think they need to do in Chinatown. But please try to listen to what is beneath those questions of you. The only way we're going to grow collectively is if we try to embrace that discomfort. So please, please watch the defensiveness. Please try to open yourself to criticism. God knows, when I was organizing an exhibition about the Asian American movement, I made a bunch of mistakes. I made a bunch of errors, factually, date-wise. People like Tomie and Bob and Corky helped me out. It's a growing process for all of us. So, yes, please just be open to the criticism. Sit with it. You don't even have to respond in this moment. You don't even have to say anything. Just sit with it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just going to turn to Twitter. A question from San Francisco. Diane asked a question, and I guess this now can be for everyone, but it was mentioned that Chinatown is described, it was described earlier as a new frontier. Why is Chinatown considered and described as a new frontier? And she comments, there's already culture here, don't forget that. I'm going to open that up.
Well, just in regards to that, I think there is a lot of language that is like Columbusing a lot of Chinatown. I mean, that article in New York Magazine didn't really encompass everything. It didn't really reflect the current situation here. I think there's a perception that Chinatown has widely remained like untouched by waves of gentrification, but that's not true, obviously. And I just think that, just like addressing everything that's been said, like occupying space is political, and I think that like regardless if you're a commercial gallery or you're not, the fact that you're there says something to people. And I think the gut feeling is coming from like the fact that Chinatown is sorry. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't talk.
Thank you, Liz. I'd love to hear. I'd love to actually hear from some other people who, just to give you a little break here. Is there anyone else who could comment on that?
I think it's important just to reiterate that the reason why so many Chinese people and Chinese Americans feel this fear and anger and anxiety is because if you go back to the roots of why we exist here, Chinatown existed because nobody cared about us. We had to come to this place we have to form our own Chinatown to fend for ourselves. And we're proud of that. And it's grown very big physically. And to see it being taken away is a very, it's scary. It's also very fearful. I mean, I'm scared of it. And it hurts. It hurts it's very disrespectful to the previous generations of my family and their families and current people living here. So when you have spaces like whether it be a gallery, a hotel, or a bar, or a restaurant, we're really skeptical whether are you here for the community or not. Chances are you're probably not. I'm not saying your organization, but I'm just saying this is the general feeling that we all have as people that live in Chinatown, grew up in Chinatown. It's inexpensive for a reason. It's inexpensive because nobody wanted to be here back then. And for any business now to come in and take advantage of that is extremely disrespectful and very hurtful. And we've seen many cities, I mean, for example, like Boston, Washington. I remember 10, 12 years ago, I went to Washington, D.C., and I saw Chinatown. All was left was just the gate and maybe like a couple of bakeries. And I don't want to imagine how it was like today. It's probably non-existent. So our biggest fear is that the intention might be, well, it's purely just for art purpose and creativity. Yes, I'm an artist also myself, and I understand the importance of that. But we're just skeptical that that's where it stops. But meanwhile, all this like many, many decades of history is being targeted. And it's not targeted intentionally, but it's potentially being eradicated through all these different businesses.
Thanks for sharing that from a personal perspective. I think there are a lot of folks in this space who have us coming to Chinatown our whole lives and feeling really uprooted and unstable at this time, and I'm very emotional. But Anna, did you have that? Yeah. Did you have something?
I wanted to respond to what you were saying, and also earlier how Herb was talking about the idea of luxury. And I feel like there is a distinction that many of us have made in this room between like arts and culture and for-profit art market. There's like definitely a difference, and I think that a big part of what's happening with like these for-profit galleries, especially the large institutions, is like this all-encompassing idea of whitewashing, like very literally. And you know, the art world is problematic for that reason, because in the art market and in art institutions historically, but also like contemporarily, you know, white male artists are like make up the bulk of successful artists or artists who get these opportunities to be shown in spaces. So it's not really, I feel like there is a difference between culture and cultural production and the culture that has existed in this area for centuries, and the kind of culture and art that like these galleries are bringing, which is completely antithetical to like what culture means in this country in general, or you know, in the world. It's just a very limited and consciously disenfranchising entity that has like popped up everywhere and has just shut things down. So I don't know, I just wanted to like add that element.
The distinction now.
Yeah.
So I think I saw your hand in case of your name tag. Sorry.
Hi everyone. Thank you to W.O.W and May for creating this platform for this conversation. So I grew up in a neighborhood, but I'm actually not in the arts world, so I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about kind of the larger ecosystem. So I'm guessing both of you are nonprofits and you receive funding from other sources. And so I'm curious to know more about kind of the accountability structure to your funders. Do they kind of dictate what community engagement looks like, or is that kind of creative direction that you have on your end?
No.
And is part of it also just having to respond to what your funders are kind of telling you to do?
It's a complicated answer. The short answer is no. We do what we want to do. But the longer answer is that we're very conscious of who our supporters are. And when I say supporters, I mean all of you. I mean people that give us hundreds of thousands of dollars, people that come to our programs, you know, people that do this and that for us, and that is our support. And we need to be a place where all those types of people can come to the museum and you know, feel a sense of belonging to it, to what we do. So in that sense, we program around that fundamental idea that our public is very diverse, and somebody should come into the museum and who we identify as like our audience, and think that this is a place that is you know, trying to talk to them, you know, in the most basic way, or relate to them. And part of that is about representation. Part of it is about being a mirror to our experience. And to me, that's an important metaphor for what we are, is a mirror, a representation of who we are, you know, as being Chinese in America. And that representation has not existed in a way that gives meaning to who we are. And it's that meaning aspect of culture that I think art is really great for. You know what I mean? And that's why I love seeing art in the neighborhood. And I just wish that the art was more sensitive. programming was more sensitive at some of these galleries, whether they're owned by this kind of people or that kind of people, and B, that I wish that more people in this community, people we think that these galleries are not for, would go into some of these galleries, because there are some excellent shows happening at galleries that we think are completely luxuriating, in the fact of being in Chinatown. And also, it's not just non-Asians that and non-Chinese that think that Chinatown is run down and dirty, that they think that it should be, more, that it should be cleaner, that it should be more luxurious. Some Chinese people think that it should be that way in Chinatown. So, once you start unpacking this, it gets very complicated. And, race is one element of it, and class is another element.
So we have about five more minutes before the closing comments, but I think Lena has.
Did you want to respond?
And then did you?
Okay.
So I think you had a question from before, and I think it just got caught up in the mix.
Okay, so why don't we? Do you want to say your question?
It's kind of morphed because there's been a lot that went on. So I'm just gonna make brief comments and maybe a question. I'm kind of sad that the woman who commented left. Not really a great metaphor for the evening. I think, and I really appreciate Ryan's historical context, as well as, and I offer this to everybody, especially in our current political and social climate, that we struggle together, and that it's really uncomfortable. But that's really important to have these hard conversations. And which then brings me to the fact that a lot of these conversations, which we don't talk about, it's not just economics, it is race related, and those are inextricable sometimes, and those influence us, and if we don't acknowledge it, then we risk having it all lumped together and not really knowing what is it we're reacting against or for. And I will also say, I am a cultural worker, I work with Fourth Arts Block, and I also thought it was really interesting that there was a resistance against Chinatown being part of the Lower East Side, which I would love to talk more about. But I do think one thing that's important as arts and cultural workers is that we're held accountable, regardless of where you stand. And especially, yes, you're a nonprofit, and maybe it's not in your mission, but somewhere along your mission there is some sort of focus towards the community. And if so, that it's really important to have that space, to just open that. So my question isn't really related to what I just said, but I thought it was really important to say because, again, as we acknowledged, there's a lot of sensitivity in the room, but again, related to all these issues that are happening. We need to be very attuned to it. Otherwise, again, we're just gonna talk about something, but actually there's something rotting something somewhere else. But I guess I'm also interested in hearing about arts and cultural workers in Chinatown. Organizing, and what, I guess, in your spaces or anyone in the room, what has your history been in terms of organizing as arts and cultural workers?
So that's a question posed. There's a lot of artists in the room. I think I saw a bunch of hands up in the room, specifically to Chinatown artists, right, and cultural workers. Does anyone want to take that on, and then we'll move on to the last?
Well, can I also add to that? And in part, this is sort of a response to what Bob was saying, Bob Lee was saying about, I guess, his concern that this become a sort of conflict between art and the community. I think that when we talk about places being frontiers, we're implicit in that is that, as someone said, people think that no one lives there, or the rent is cheap, or it's just open season on going in and developing a space into something else. And I think everyone understands how artists are used as sort of the front line in gentrification. That artists go into these neighborhoods, and in most cases are just as poor as the people who live there. And by transforming these, by impacting the value of these spaces, they inadvertently bring on more development that displaces people. And I think that part of that awareness is that artists are complicit in gentrification, whether they want to be or not. And so in terms of activism or arts and cultural work in neighborhoods like Chinatown, I think that artists can be sort of the vanguard of talking about how they can turn this around. I mean, I think that this kind of a conversation is the beginning of really reaching out to some of these gallery spaces and finding out perhaps how we can build an exchange, whether or not we can get some kind of recognition or possibly programming or give back. We're not asking that they change the art in the galleries. You know, we understand that these are businesses, but in terms of their accountability and their understanding of how they are impacting the neighborhood, I think that we can join forces with them. At least initially, that's our hope. I mean, I would like to hear from the audience whether you think that's possible.
What you just said is exactly what the new museum would love to hear as to how they can do it and influence all the galleries that are following them.
I just wanted to
sorry. Lena, and then you, and then you'll be the last comment for the night, and then we'll get to closing, but there's been a lot of rich stuff. You have something burning? Burning? It's burning? Okay. So you'll be the last one. Okay, so we'll go like that. Lena?
Am I burning?
You're burning. You're going to be the burning one.
Am I speaking?
After,
I just want to make a comment.
No. I'm sorry. Lena, Derek, and then Lena.
So I am like care a lot about Chinatown and care a lot about gentrification, but I'm super conflict averse. So I'm like so stressed out right now, but also feel compelled to talk. So let me just say that I think part of what is difficult and what makes this feel like two plates kind of rubbing against each other is that I think that the way that like Chinatown is being framed, and also in this room, and then also maybe often is as a kind of there's so many comments that I forgot what I was going to say. Is like people are presenting themselves as sort of like credible like participants, or like, you know, there's like a kind of, you know, you make ownership or you make claims based on your kind of, you know, authenticity and your sort of your rootedness in this place, because it is a place of such history and depth. And what makes it tough is that I think maybe folks who are identifying as artists or gallerists are being either framed or self-framing as, you know, there's more of an interest in like sort of identifying as like being an outsider or being like marginalized, and therefore like that's why, you know, you would be compelled to make art or some kind of cultural production. But actually, like as people have mentioned throughout the night, there is like a porousness between those categories, and neither of those are fixed. Like Chinatown is both this historic place where it is very meaningful that people have such rootedness, but it's also a place that is of continuous outsiderness and marginalization, as well as being part of the city. So it's both outsider and, you know, literally like downtown, you know, you can't get more center than that in New York City. So where maybe those two kind of, where what feels like tension is actually like maybe a place of like of overlap, actually, because it's about difference. Like both sets of both of those kind of both of those like feelings have to do with being different, either like racialized as different or identifying as different for, you know, being an artist, or for being because of your you know, your sexual practices, or because of your gender identity. Like those are kinds of difference that a place that, like Chinatown, should be accommodating towards. And I don't know how this sort of fits into the gentrification thing, but I just wanted to say that, like, I appreciate, like, both the critiques that have been, like, I don't know that much about Chinatown Soup, so I'm very appreciative that you've come here and, like, I can learn about you as someone in the neighborhood, and I actually will learn about your after-school programs. But I also am hearing the critiques, and so I feel like this discomfort that makes me want to, like, vomit is, like, actually hopefully gonna extend the WOW project past this conversation, and maybe even, like, I'm very interested also in the prior question about, is there a kind of, like, organizing history or an organizing model or organization that arts and culture workers and artists can link up to. And I think that WOW and the Chinatown Art Brigade are two possibilities, because they are, leading us to make these uncomfortable conversations.
Thank you.
For that. Thanks.
Sorry that you want to vomit, though.
Yeah, no.
It's a bucket, not your Daryl, do you want to?
I just want to piggyback off what Lena was talking about. I was thinking about Chinatown Soup and this space, and also the idea that Herb was talking about the experience of art, how important it is, and what do these things have in common. There are places where there's overlap, and in the overlap there are dialogues, and it doesn't just have to happen through an artistic experience. Conversations can be creative exercises, right? And this overlap space, with all the tensions and all that other stuff, this is what it looks like for people to come together and claim their positions in the conversation about a multicultural neighborhood. So I just want to commend everybody involved in this, including us, the participants, in having these tough conversations. This is what moves progress forward. Just in terms of Tomia's comments, well, I mean, we have a little bit of a related background and work that we've done. I don't want to go away from Chinatown, but we're both related to the John Mitchell Foundation. And we have an artist residency program in New Orleans, right? And as New Yorkers setting up an artist residency program in New Orleans, we met a lot of resistance from local interests. And they had a lot of the same suspicions about us that you might see in some parts of this conversation. Things that we took on as a cultural institution within our own right, in terms of even the residencies, that we would make some of them available to local artists and community outreach. This is something that we had the freedom to create for ourselves as a standard, but you have to have that balance. Now, the absence of that balance in this context creates a lot of tension. So, like Tomie was saying, to restore that balance, it's going to involve more overlap, more dialogues with the new museum and so forth, and to see what's possible. Just being exposed to each other's positions, I think, is very profound opportunity to actually open up new things. And like I was saying, conversations can be creative, can create new outcomes. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. That was. I feel like we should end with that comment, or the whole panel with that. But thank you. The burning question guy in the green. You'll be the last question, comment.
I just want to make a quick comment about the tensions about all these galleries opening here. I think it arises because a lot of these gallery owners are culturally insensitive to the neighborhood. Okay, they come in with an attitude of privilege. Okay, so if I walk into a gallery on Orchard Street, I don't feel welcome there. Because they look at me and say, "Oh, you can't buy this stuff." So they need to really reach out to the community, and a lot of the old Chinatown residents feel that they're coming in as an invading force. So that creates that tension there. I feel the same way. I'm a preservationist for Chinatown, so I can't see bars, galleries, or anything opening in this neighborhood that don't welcome the Chinese. That's going to take back 150 years to spheres of influence in Shanghai, where invading powers carved out their own little sections where the Chinese are not allowed in. So I think we have that kind of feeling here.
Thank you.
I think unless someone has, I know we're at time, I apologize. Unless someone has a really burning comment or question, I think we're going to maybe move into the closing comments by the panelists, and maybe we can include May in there if you want. But we can start with Herb, and that maybe the question can be moving forward, because I think you started us, Derek, with that, sort of like continuing the dialogue, moving forward, what's next steps, right, beyond this conversation. So, Herb, if you want to start, we'll go to Michelle. I don't know if Tomie, you want to say anything, and then go to May.
Okay.
I don't know. It's been great to hear everybody and feel this this emotional response, because I have it. You could probably tell. And again, I am conflicted because I love art, and I think it's valuable to have in Chinatown. And I think for me, what would be incredible is to see more people, more Chinese people, Asian Americans opening up galleries and being interested in developing meaning out of things that you simply look at or experience in space without the pressure to buy anything. And even in these commercial galleries, you can walk in there for free. Yes, you may feel intimidated, they may feel unwelcoming, but they are free to go into, and often there's no prices, so you don't even know how much stuff costs unless you ask. And you can have a relationship to objects that is not about thinking whether you should own it or not. No offense to you guys, because you do have prices on them. How much is that? No. But I think that's the real value of art, is it's like this other relationship to things besides wanting to own them. But in addition to that is like, what does it mean to us? And not enough Chinese Americans are involved in that thinking. Therefore, some other people do it, and then we get all like tied up in knots thinking about why it's happening like this in our neighborhoods. Why don't we do that like Bob did? And it's happening. Like we see like places like Practice and Sleep Center, and I think what May's doing has totally potential for that. So I would like to see more of that happening in this neighborhood.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's honesty, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and listen and speak more about Soup, the great small social experiment on the corner of Orchard and Canal. And being from New York originally, I guess my overarching perspective about the city is that the only constant here is change. And there's such a need to preserve multiple heritages here, especially with the onslaught of corporate gentrification and Essex Crossing, and this whole neighborhood is going to be completely transformed within the next 5 years, and it's going to affect all of us, whether you're Chinese or white or Black, Spanish, whatever you are. We're all gonna see a very different city very, very soon. And I just hope that we can all move forward with open minds and open hearts, and sort of put our fears to the side and understand that exclusion is not a way to preserve, and it's not a way to communicate. And we're all going to make mistakes, but if we're brave enough to speak about them and to speak to each other and do this type of work that we're doing tonight, I think we'll be okay. So I want you all to know Soup's open. We're not a bougie gallery by any means. We're having a lot of fun along the way, and we're hoping that we can stick around and exist as a bridge and a generative place for creative people. So thank you.
I guess that in response to that, I just feel like if change is inevitable, then we have to be a part of it. So first of all, I would like to use my time to thank the panelists for sharing their wonderful perspectives on this gallery scene, and especially thank the respondents, Ryan, Sean, thank you, and Liz, thank you so much for your comments. This is only the second in a series of conversations that WOW has presented, and I hope it will be the first in many more exchanges. I urge all of you to consider taking this subject on in your own ways, in other venues. Perhaps MoCA would be interested. And I just look forward to talking about this more.
May?
Yeah, I really would just like to reiterate what Tomie was saying. Thank you so much for coming and for being a part of this, and for being vulnerable and honest in the midst of lots of discomfort. But I think that this is the first step and the first conversation of many, and echoing what Tomie said, just encourage you all to take this conversation outside of the space as well, because I think that's where a lot of legwork can be done, and then once we have another open session, we can bring our reflections and thoughts and ideas to another conversation. But to also touch on what Ryan was talking about history, I think it's also important that we all educate ourselves in the history of this neighborhood, of different neighborhoods in New York, because it's good to have an understanding of history in order to look forward to growth and change. So thank you so much for coming.
And I was just gonna say that please keep in touch. I was just gonna try to end on a positive note, and it's been really an amazing conversation. This conversation ended a lot better than I thought. I thought there'd be like tomatoes, bread and cake being thrown across the room and vomiting. But it went really well, and I think that obviously we're very uncomfortable because it has come to a head, right? With over 100 galleries probably at this point in Chinatown proper. And so we all are seeing those changes, and it's going to be cause some anxiety and anxiousness in us all. But I did want to just close by sort of echoing what different folks have said and just trying to summarize a little bit. But it sounds like everyone's been saying, right, in different ways, that it's not so black and white, right? That, a lot of, whether they're nonprofit institutions in this neighborhood, or ones that perceive themselves as serving the community, that the spirit of those organizations may be quite different than commercial galleries, right? But for some of us, I'm not as familiar with that art world. I think maybe there is some self-education that has to happen, let's say for myself, right? I don't see that distinction. I just see, honestly, I feel like an outsider. I'm not welcome. When I go in there, people give me looks. They don't think I can afford something, as you were saying, and then I just kind of leave, and that's that, right? So how do we just, really bridge that gap that's there, because it is not so black and white. And then the other thing that I think you were just raising, Michelle, is the inclusion, right? And so I hope that folks don't walk away with the perception or the thinking that we're saying that we want to be exclusive, right? This is only a space for Asian Americans or Chinese Americans or Chinese folks. But that I think inclusion and coming into this neighborhood, what is also really important is accountability, right? So inclusion also includes accountability to the communities that have been here. And so I think that what I've been hearing from different folks and comments is that there is an accountability. Once you're here, once you have a footprint in this community, it is changing, and there's a changing dynamic. So what does that mean in terms of your relationship to the community and how you engage? And what does that accountability look like? And then just the final thing that I kind of was hearing is the need for continued dialogue. Obviously, I wish we had like a couple more hours to continue talking, because I feel like some people have just kind of we're at the cusp of something. But I invite folks to continue being in touch with the WOW space, because I know this is, again, just the second in a series of conversations, and also Chinatown Art Brigade, because the woman from Fab, I forgot your first name already, Denise, what you said was so important, because as cultural workers who are in the Chinatown Art Brigade and other folks like Corky Lee and some other folks who are in the space, Bob, who've been doing this for a long time, I think that we see ourselves as vessels and using these, our skills and what we have to offer as a platform. And it is really important to align ourselves with the organizing that's happening already in the Chinatown Working Group with CAB and other groups that have been fighting. So we're not just doing it alone as artists, but we actually have a longer and a wider vision and mission of protecting Chinatown. And as a few people have said, how do we keep our eye on the prize of protecting Chinatown for the working class immigrants who've been here for generations, right? And the galleries are just one part of it, and they can be allies, right? Some of these folks can be allies, but how do we continue those really, really difficult conversations? So thank you so much for the panelists and to the respondents, to everyone who asked questions, people who opened up and poured their hearts out a little bit in their comments, and it's really difficult, but I hope people continue to have this dialogue and give yourselves a round of applause. If we can give the panelists a round of applause. Space will be open if you want to connect with a friend or someone.
And just a few other thank yous. Thank you to Transfiguration Church for the chairs. Thank you to the Chinatown Art Brigade. Thank you to Gum Hing Bakery who provided the delicious sponge cakes. Thank you to my whole entire family. To all of our viewers on live stream, Facebook Live, we use every single live something because of technical difficulties. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, stick around. Thank you.